Let me check and make sure we're up live on social media and we'll be ready to go. Okay, Princetta, we're good.
the University of Southern Mississippi and William Carey University, both in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, where she received the Bachelor of Science degree in psychology and the Master of Science in counseling psychology, respectively. And so we welcome you again with us tonight, and we are anticipating and expecting you to share some knowledge that will help us all along the way. And so we turn it over to you now.
Thank you so much, Miss Princetta, and thank you to Annuary. Thanks to Pastor Wilson and to all of the Galilee Baptist Church for having me again to just share with you some things that are definitely very passionate to me, of course, because this is not only what I do for a living, but this is my God gift. God uses me as a conduit for healing. And so it is my service to give back to my community and make sure that we're knowledgeable about things that have to do with mental health. The first thing I want to do, though, is I want to kind of break down some stigma. Miss Princetta said one thing that I definitely agree with. She said these are things that we usually sweep under the rug and we don't like to talk about because we're supposed to be strong. So we're going to kind of talk about that. And we're also going to talk about the myth that if you need to go to counseling, then you don't have faith. And in faith-based communities, there are a lot of people who believe that going to therapy contradicts their faith when it doesn't. So we're going to talk about that. I'm going to begin to share screen with you. I'll share some things with you for about 15 or 20 minutes. And then I'm going to open up the floor for not only just questions, but also for discussion. Does that sound like a plan? So, can everybody see this screen? Can everyone see this screen? It says, does therapy and religion contradict each other? I say no, because the ministry of healing the mind is very important. Going to therapy is not a sign of a lack of faith. There are 47 verses pertaining to the mind in the Bible. Proverbs 16:9 says, the mind of man plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps. 1 Corinthians 14:14 says, for if I pray in tongue, my spirit prays, but my mind is unfruitful. That's saying that we don't have good thought processes. James 1:8 says, being a double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. And then Romans 12:22 says, and do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind so that you may prove what the will of God is, that which is good and acceptable and perfect. So there are verses in the Bible that tells us the importance of having good mental health. If we don't have good mental health and we're distracted by things that are clouding our mind or things that are causing us to not be able to think clearly, how are we able to hear the voice of God and get directives from God and know what we're supposed to do in the kingdom? So it's important that we be of sound mind. One of the most quoted/misquoted verses of the Bible is about the mind, and that comes from Proverbs 23:7. It says, for as he thinketh in his heart, so is he. So this lets us know that it starts in the mind and it penetrates to the heart, and then it becomes a part of our behavior, which is why I love what's called cognitive behavioral therapy and this cognitive model, because what it shows us is when a situation happens, we have a thought. And that thought influences how we feel. And that feeling influences how we behave. So does a man thinketh, then in his heart, so is he. This is a very important thing that I want you guys to look at. When a situation happens in our lives, it is important that we take time to be intentional in our thought processing, understanding that how we interpret this situation and what we think about this situation is going to influence how we feel. And how we feel is going to influence how we behave. But all too often, when we're faced with situations, when something happens, we go here. No, we don't. We go here. We start feeling, okay? And based upon that feeling, we let that feeling influence our behavior. And that's called being impulsive. We can never leave the thought process out, okay? This has a lot to do with how we fight depression. And we'll talk a little bit about that on down the line. So keep this in mind. So let's talk about depression. Depression is a common illness. It is a common and serious medical illness that negatively affects the way you think, the way you feel, and how you act. And fortunately, it is also treatable. Depression causes feelings of sadness and of loss of interest in activities and things you once enjoyed. There are 5 most common signs of depression. One of them is a persistent depressed mood or a persistent low mood. Now, it's natural to feel down from time to time. So the key word is persistent. Another sign of depression is a loss of interest in things you once enjoyed. Sometimes we lose interest in things that we used to love. We don't know why, but that could be a sign and symptom of depression. Feelings of worthlessness, an inability to concentrate, thoughts of harming self. All of these are signs of depression. Of course, there are many more, but those are 5 of the most common signs of depression. 3 of the most common causes of depression are cognitive distortions, negative core beliefs, and generational trauma. So let's kind of get into this. Cognitive distortions. Cognitive distortions are irrational thoughts that can influence your emotions. Everyone experiences cognitive distortions to some degree, but in their most extreme forms, they can be harmful. So when we talk about cognitive distortions, we're talking about little thought processes that cause us to do things like exaggerate or minimize the importance of things. The kind of little thought processes that causes us to see only the worst possible outcome of a situation. Overgeneralization, making broad interpretation from a single or few events. Oh, she didn't speak to me. She doesn't like me. That is overgeneralizing. Magical thinking, thinking that I'm a good person and bad things shouldn't happen to me. Those kind of thought processes lead to depression. When we personalize things and make things about us, even though it's not about us, but we take it on and we make it about us, that can lead to depression, as well as thinking that we can read other people's mind, interpreting what we think are the thoughts and beliefs of other people. Oh, she don't like me. She probably mad because I wore the same hat she did. Or fortune telling, the expectation that you know how a situation is going to turn out and it's going to turn out badly, but you don't have any evidence of that. These are the kind of little irrational thought processes or cognitive distortions that lead to depression. The next is core beliefs. A person's most central ideas about themselves, others, and the world are what core beliefs are. These beliefs act like a lens through which every situation and life experience is seen. And because of this, people may be in the same situation, but think, feel, and behave very differently based upon their core beliefs. Core beliefs is very influential in how we feel about ourselves, how we feel about other people, and how we feel about the world around us. And core beliefs are those hidden beneath the surface level beliefs, not the things you say with your mouth about yourself or about the world or other people, but things that you feel in your core that other people may not know, like I'm a loser, I'm weak, I'm unlovable, I'm bad, the world is dangerous, nothing ever goes right, nobody likes me, I don't deserve to live, I'm trapped. All of these things are harmful core beliefs that lead to depression. So the question is, where do we get these core beliefs from? And this is going to run into our generational trauma. Where do we get these core beliefs from? Core beliefs are beliefs that we are not born with, but they are learned. It is our parents' responsibility. And I want you guys to listen to this. If you're a parent, if you're grandparents, listen to this very carefully. Core beliefs are beliefs that we are taught by our parents. It is our parents' responsibility when we are children to teach us things about ourselves. They teach us these things by showing us these things or telling us things about ourselves. Sometimes they do it purposefully, and sometimes they do it inadvertently. These things can be positive or they can be negative. If they are negative, our brain has a way of hardwiring things that are negative because our brain is trained to have a negative bias, to think the worst thing first, okay, for survival. And so as we progressed into civilized people, we have not, our brain didn't get the memo. So our brain continues to think the most terrible thing first, okay? So it's already wired to think negative. Well, if you have a parent that says things like, you ain't gonna be nothing, you make me sick, you worthless, you ain't smart. If you have a parent that tells you these things are hardwired in your brain, and you develop an inner critic that begins to repeat those things to you over and over again. People can't be trusted. All of these things, you begin to believe them. They begin to become a part of your core belief, and it negatively impacts the way you show up in all of your relationships with people, your interpersonal relationships, friends, families, romantic relationships. It negatively impacts that simply because even though these core beliefs may not be true, they feel like they're true. And it causes us to have difficulty trusting people. It causes us to have feelings of inadequacy in different relationships. It causes us to be excessively jealous or overly confrontational or aggressive, or it causes us to put other people's needs above our own. And that leads to mental health problems like depression, anxiety, substance abuse, difficulty handling stress, and low self-esteem, okay? So I'm going to stop sharing screen. Well, let me go to generational trauma. We also, another thing that leads to depression is generational trauma. Generational trauma in the form of family secrets, mommy issues, daddy issues, failed relationships, okay? Family secrets are one of the number one thing that causes depression. We will be harmed by family. We will be mistreated. We will be sexually abused. We will be physically abused, emotionally abused in family settings and in family situations. And guess what? We're taught to be quiet. You don't say anything about that. Hold that in. So what do you think happens when a person holds something in that was traumatic for them and they're told they can't express it and they're told that they can't say anything about it? They internalize that, and it negatively impacts their ability to grow emotionally healthy. Mama issues. People that have dysfunctional relationships with their moms, people that have dysfunctional relationships with their fathers, whether they were absent, whether they were their abusers, whether they were neglectful, whether they abandoned them. Those things cause people to have depression. Because remember, we said that our parents are responsible for sending messages to us about who we are as children. So if our parents abandon us, the message they send is that we're not important. We grow up feeling we're not important. We develop an inferiority complex, and then it comes out in the way that we interact with other people. Another thing that causes generational trauma is failed relationships, whether it's romantic relationships, failed relationships with family, failed relationships at church, failed relationships cause us to have tons of depression. So I wanted to kind of share some of these things with you all because I wanted us to not be so focused on the things that happen around us that can cause us to become depressed, but begin to focus more on the things inside of us that may also cause depression. I think we know a lot about the things that are outside of us that lead to depression, but we never, ever, ever focus on the things that are internal that need to be worked on that would help to improve our mood and help us to cope better. Any questions, any discussions?
If you have any questions, you can drop them in the chat and I'll announce them, or if you feel comfortable unmuting yourself and answering your own question, I think that'll be fine as well. I don't know if there are any questions on Facebook or YouTube. I know it's being monitored, but I haven't received anything
Okay.
just yet.
And it is a different approach to talking about depression, one that we never talk about very often in our community. We don't talk about the things inside of us that cause us to have these low moods and that cause us to have the self-doubt and all of these things that lead to depression. And it's important for us to address these things. We cannot continue to pack things down and act like they don't bother us. We have got to stop being strong Black women and strong Black men and going through life acting like things don't negatively impact us. They do, but somewhere along the line, we've been taught that we pack that stuff down, we don't say anything, and that we go about our life and we'll be fine. And that's not true. We have got to begin to unpack some of this stuff that we've packed down that keeps us from being our authentic selves and keeps our mind jaded to believe that we're anything else but who God says we are. So one of the ways that this happens is, how many of you remember growing up? And we're growing up and you may come home and you say, Mama, my back hurt. And they say, girl, you don't even have no back. Go in there and lay down. Okay. Or you may say, well, Mama, I'm hungry. You ain't hungry. You just got through eating. Go in there and go to bed. Get ready for bed. What does that do? That teaches us that our feelings, A, don't matter. 2, that it's a bad thing to express our feelings. And therefore, we begin to internalize things that we feel because we feel that we're not supposed to say anything. That's where that packing stuff down starts. That's exactly where that starts. That's exactly how we begin to carry all this trauma and all this pain and all this hurt, and we put it on our backs and we call ourselves strong as we march to being on this level of people saying, oh, she's so strong. No, she's so hurt. A lot of times she's so broken. He's so hurt. A lot of times he's so broken. Because we're walking around with all of this stuff inside of us, hurt, pain, trauma, abuse, and we're afraid to open our mouths and say, I'm hurting, because we don't want to seem like we're the weak ones. That is a reason that there's so many disparities in healthcare. I want you guys to think about this. When you see a movie and something happens to a white lady in a movie, she fall out. She hollers, she cry, people come around her, they love on her, and they nurse her back to health. When something happens to a Black woman, Florida Evans lost her husband. And what did she do? She was a strong Black woman, wasn't she? Oh, she's so strong. But in reality, Florida Evans was hurting. And she had a breakdown at the end of that episode. Why? Because she was trying to carry this strong Black woman narrative. Well, let's say that some doctors, who a lot of them are white, all they see are the images that are put out on the media in movies about us. And they always see us being strong Black women and strong Black men. So when we go to the doctor and we say, I'm having anxiety, I'm having a hard time coping, they're going to tell you to go home and exercise, diet, go to bed early, and all those things. But the white lady gonna go in and say, I'm having a difficult time coping, and she's gonna get the proper care. She's gonna get what she needs because you strong. You can be in pain. Same thing. There was a young girl who was a YouTube star in labor, about to have her baby. She goes to the hospital. She lets them know she's in excruciating pain. Well, she's a strong Black woman. Maybe she's not in pain. She can handle it. She's strong because that's the image that we put before everybody, right? Guess what? She dies, the baby lives, and guess what? Nobody ever believed her because people don't take our pain seriously because we don't acknowledge our pain and we're not transparent about when we're hurting, and we've got to stop it. Depression is real. A lot of what you see in your neighborhoods with these kids killing other children and doing things that are violent, a lot of that does not have anything to do with them just being bad and being sinister. A lot of that has to do with them not being able to cope with the pain, things that have happened to them. If they're growing up in a underprivileged environment or in poverty, poverty is considered a form of childhood trauma now. And so all of these kids out here aren't just killing people because they're bad rascals. A lot of them are hurting and they're depressed. And unlike us, because we don't do a good job of showing them how to express feeling, we're not doing a good job of showing them what it looks like to have a meltdown and to have to go to counseling and to say, listen, I'm having a hard time. So they don't feel comfortable coming to us. See, when we're being strong Black men and women in front of our children, when our children begin to suffer, guess what happens? They don't feel comfortable coming to us because you're perfect in their sight. You can handle everything. You never break down. You handle everything as cool as a cucumber. So if I come to my mom and tell her this, she's going to think I'm weak. So I'm going to internalize it. And I walk around with this hurt until it negatively impacts me. And I begin to pick up some unhealthy coping strategies to help me deal with it, whether it be in a gang, whether it be using narcotics, whether it's alcoholism, whether it's being promiscuous. So our children are suffering with depression too. It's not just an adult thing. It's a teen thing. It's a little bitty kid thing. They're little bitty children who struggle with depression. But they don't know how to tell you they're depressed. So most of the time, little kids say, guess what? My stomach hurts. Because that's the only way they know how to express what they're feeling. Yes.
Mrs. Brown, we have a question. Says, how do you deal with depression when the cause is in your presence daily and no escape from it is in sight?
One of the ways, well, first of all, if you are in an environment where that's causing you to feel depressed, that may not be the proper environment for you. That may not be where you need to be. I don't care who it is. It can be mama, daddy, sister, brother, husband. If you're in a situation that's causing you to be depressed, you need to reevaluate, is this where I'm supposed to be? The next thing is this. We have to learn that we are in control of our thoughts. Our thoughts are not in control of us. Do you know how many people tell me that they don't believe that they can control their thoughts? But we can. And remember that thing I showed you? When we control our thoughts, they control how we feel. And then how we feel dictates how we behave. So I have a choice as to what I'm going to think. Miss Prancetta can come over here to my office and step on my foot, and I can choose to think, you know what? She don't like me. She mean, honey, she did it on purpose. And if I begin to think that, then how do I begin to feel? Resentful. I begin to feel angry. And then how may I act? I might step on Miss Princetta foot, or I may be ugly to her. But if she comes in my office and she steps on my foot and I choose to think, I wonder if something going on with her. I wonder if she's not feeling well today. That's going to cause me to feel more compassionate and understanding. My behavior will then be different. I'll say, hey, Miss Vincetta, how are you doing? Listen, I noticed when you came in, you stepped on my foot. Are you okay? Is everything good with you? Do you see how your thought can change the outcome of things? That's why it's important to be intentional in your thought processes. So, how do you cope with living in the home with someone who's the cause of your depression? You got to change the way you think. You have to reframe your thoughts. You have to begin to think something different so that you can feel something different and you can behave differently. Any questions?
In other words, we actually do have the power to change the narrative.
Yes.
Because it's the mind.
And it's in the word of God.
Absolutely.
So does a man thinking.
That's right.
In his
That's
heart,
right.
so is he.
That's right.
So we have the power to do that, but we don't understand that we have the power to regulate what we think. Some people really think they don't have control over what they think, and they do. You can even choose what you want to pay attention to and what thoughts you don't want to pay attention to. But what happens is we become stuck in the world of thought so much that we lose touch with the world of direct experience, the world that we can experience through our five senses. And that causes us to be depressed too, being stuck in a world of thought, just thinking and thinking and thinking. I hear people say, I'm an overthinker, and they kind of brag about it a little bit, but that's not good. That comes from anxiety thinking. All of these kinds of things lead to depression. It's things that we can do every day to improve our quality of life and to help us combat depression. But we have to get into the knowledge of these things. And if we're having problems, we have to be okay saying, you know what? I may need to go see a therapist. I may need counseling. And we got to be okay with that. That's not a sign of weakness. That's a sign of a person who's strong enough to notice that they have a deficiency or that they're going through something and that they need help.
Ms. Brown,
Yes.
someone had a question. They were told that you can choose to be depressed. And they want to know, how can they handle when someone tells them that? Because they were telling someone that they were depressed, and then they were told, you choose to be depressed. That's an option that you have.
There are different types of depression. There are some people who absolutely have a chemical imbalance. They have an imbalance of the neurotransmitter serotonin, which is responsible for our mood. So there are some people who absolutely have to be medicated in order not to be depressed. That is a sign that has been scientifically proven, and we have medications out here who help with the reuptake of serotonin and helps to build that neurotransmitter and increase your mood. Some people actually have chemical imbalances. Some people have chemical imbalances that have been caused by trauma. Some are genetic. Okay. But being depressed, when I have a low mood, okay, if my mood is low, if I'm struggling with something that has to do with trauma and I don't know that, it's not my fault that my mood is low. I may not know why. There may be something inside of me. There may be things that I'm going through. There may be things from my past that I haven't addressed. There may be situations that I'm facing now. There's situational depression. If somebody come and repossess your car, you're gonna be depressed. You're gonna be sad, right? So there are different types of depression and different causes of depression. And we cannot invalidate anybody's mood when they say they're depressed. We as Black people have got to stop that. I'm not depressed because I want to be depressed. I'm depressed, but now I know that I have the power to do something about it. And if I am going to therapy and they're teaching me all of the coping strategies and it's not helping, then I need to consider that I may have a chemical imbalance. But we have got to stop invalidating people's feelings when they say they feel depressed. Depression is real. Anyone else? Anyone have any comments?
So how can we help loved ones who have depression and they won't go see a counselor?
The way that you can help loved ones who are depressed and don't want to see a counselor is first try to help break the stigma of mental health counseling. Actually sit down and say, listen, there is nothing wrong with getting help. All of us need counseling. Do you know that counselors have counselors? Or else we wouldn't be able to do our job and be impactful and help other people if we didn't process through our own things. So it's perfectly okay for someone to say, I don't want to go because people gonna think I'm crazy. Ain't nothing wrong with me. That's been a part of what's wrong in our community. We have got to break down the stigma of mental health. That is the number one way. The second thing is, if you have a person that you notice is depressed and you're not able to reach them, you may want to try to reach out to someone who may have more influence over them than you. You might want to sit and listen. Why? Why don't you want to go to therapy? Well, let me bring you some information. Educate them. And then just be a support. Just be a good support system for them. Most people that are ambivalent about coming to therapy, normally when they're educated on it and they have people that support them and they have that one influential voice that says, yeah, that's what you need to do, they usually end up coming to therapy, even if they just come this one time just to try it. And usually if they see a good therapist and the therapist is able to build a good rapport with them, then they usually stay and they're usually helped out a lot. They usually learn a lot of coping strategies.
We have another question. Mrs. Brown says, how do you handle negative comments from relatives who are always negative and the negative comments lead to depression?
Okay, you got to know the truth about who you are. You got to know the truth about who you are at your core. That's another thing why Black people walk around here depressed. We have forgotten about the essence of who we are. We have become so validated by money, cars, clothes, social status, degrees, titles, that we don't even know who we are at our core. You strip us down of those things, and some people can't tell you who they are because they're only defined by things outside of them. So when you're defined by things outside of you, other people can tell you who you are and tell you who you aren't, and it will negatively impact you. But if you know who you are at your core, if I know that I am a daughter of the Most High God, and if I know that I am a conduit that God uses for healing, and if I know that I am peace, love, and empowerment, then guess what? What other people say about me and think about me is none of my business. It doesn't have anything to do with me. All I have to do is show up as my authentic self and stand 10 toes down on what I know to be true about me. So that's why it's important that you know who you are. And the thing that helped me come into the knowledge of who I was, and that was a turning factor in my life, that was transformative in my life, was in 2010. I laid down on my couch and I asked God to just show me myself the way that He saw me, because I couldn't see myself any other way than by how other people were trying to define me and how the world had jaded me to believe I was. And then I was patient. And when God showed me myself the way that He saw me, I believed Him. And I began to practice being her until I became her. Because if my master said that's who I am, then that's who I am, because He made me and He knows all about me. So it's about you knowing the truth about who you are.
About to
Well,
go Sunday morning on us, Miss Brown.
Oh, y'all know, I can get happy all by myself.
I know that's right. Somebody else had a question?
well, I just have a comment,
Hi,
Princetta.
beautiful. Hi.
And my comment is that I have been an advocate for counseling. Some years ago, I went to a therapist because I was going through some things that I'm thinking, is this all there is? Just cooking and cleaning and being a wife. And, I was trying to relive my mother's life. And that wasn't satisfying me anymore. So I decided that I was going to therapy, and I did. And it was like, well, why didn't somebody tell me this? It's like I have been blinded. And after my therapy and I've grown since then, I've shared that, I've tried to encourage other women, to seek therapy, because we encounter things that we can't handle by ourselves. If I break a leg, an arm, I'm going to a doctor. And so when I have broken things in my life that I can't handle or can't fix, then God has prepared people, like He prepares doctors. He has servants to help us with life and living. And so that's what I've been successful with a few of my friends. And they have sought counseling, and then they've passed it on. They've encouraged. So we do need help. We need help, and I'm really an advocate for that.
Mrs. Bradley, thank you for being such an advocate for mental health. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Because there are a lot of people, a lot of our seasoned saints, they definitely don't care about any therapy. They will tell you quick. But Mrs. Bradley, you are a testimony that you can love God, you can be a woman of faith, and you can still go to therapy and be healed.
Yes, they say, well, they'll say, well, I got Jesus. I said, well, you need Jesus and you need counseling.
Yes, 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 indeed. I have a t-shirt that says that you can have Jesus and a therapist.
Oh, okay.
Yes, I may get you one, Mrs. Bradley.
Oh, I would love to wear it.
I will. I'll
Mrs.
get it to you.
Mrs. Brown, we have a comment, says this has been very great for me because it's been many years. I battled depression and it has helped me in many ways. So thanks so much. Then we have another question. It says, is it best for young teens, males, to seek help from a male therapist?
It depends. It depends. I'm gonna be honest with you. Most of the time when I have seen, because I don't see teens anymore, I've gotten a little bit too old and I got a grandbaby and I don't have the I don't have the wherewithal to see teens anymore because that takes a lot. It takes a lot. But most of the time when I've seen African American teenage boys, they do better with females for some reason. Usually it's because of their mother. And so they really can connect with a female therapist as like a mother figure, kind of. I have had some male therapists who do a great job with boys too, but sometimes because boys have issues with men abandoning them and not having a dad, sometimes they don't do as well with men and they kind of have like an ego thing with them. So it just depends on the child. It depends on the circumstance. Depends on the clinician and what their specialty is. There are a lot of variables, but it's been my personal experience that teenage boys have done well with female counselors, and African American people do better with African American counselors.
We also had a viewer on, I think it was YouTube.
Mhm.
They said that, thank you, this is very good. And then we've had another question come in. It says, how do you handle knowing that your relationship with your mother is and always has been toxic, but it wears on you because you feel that you are not pleasing God by not having a relationship with her?
You don't have to dishonor your mama, but we don't have to be in a relationship with anybody and it's toxic. That includes our mama, daddy, grandmama, granddaddy. We don't have to be in a relationship with anybody that's going to disturb our peace. If a person is toxic, they're toxic, and we don't have to be in relationship with them. And that's another generational thing. Black people will make you be in relationship with people that are toxic to you. Black people will make you go to the barbecue and hug the uncle that molested you. Okay, toxic. So no, if you and your mom's relationship is toxic, you don't have to disrespect your mother, but you can choose to protect your peace by not engaging with her. And then if it's meaningful to you and you want to reconcile the relationship, because some people don't, but if you want to reconcile the relationship, then you both need to go to counseling, the family counseling.
Do you have a name? Yeah, Jamie Isaacson. I was at 11th Street and 7th Avenue. And he did me sort of two costumes. There was a third in the
Can you, everybody please mute? Thank you. Yeah, that's a real bad stigma in our culture, in our community. And it goes back to what you said early on. You know, we just don't talk about things. But I think in these coming years, I think we're learning that it's okay to open up a little more.
Yeah.
You know, a little more free with sharing. Everybody is not going to criticize you or, you know, mistreat you or look at you funny if you have an issue. And then at the end of the day, the truth of the matter is your peace is more important than what people think. And so whatever you need to do to get there, to be in that place, then that's what you need to do. We have about 10 more minutes, give or take a little bit. If anybody else has any more questions, any more comments, Mrs. Brown, if you have anything else that you want to share with us, this really has been great. I've worked in social services for the last 21 years, not in a counselor facet. I worked case management, and we see just a plethora, multiplicity of issues that people deal with. And so just to know that there are counselors out there who are really, really concerned, you know, from more than just the professional perspective, it does make it easier to enter into those kinds of relationships if you need that kind of help. I just got a question that says, how do you change your thought process when you are depressed?
Well, a lot of times it's difficult if you are clinically depressed, if you have a chemical imbalance. Oftentimes you can reframe your thoughts all you want to, but until you go to a psychiatrist and let them evaluate you to see if they can get you on some medications that can help you with that chemical imbalance, it will be difficult for you to just alone reframe, you know, reframing and challenging negative thoughts and things like that. It'll be difficult for you to just overcome that by coping strategies. But if you want to reframe your thoughts, the first thing you do is you challenge negative thoughts. Let's say you have a negative thought. The first thing you need to think about is, do I have evidence of that? Do I have evidence of that? Then do I have evidence against that, contrary to that? If I do, was I attempting to take on that thought without looking at all of the evidence? Usually it will be yes. So that is one of the ways that we can challenge negative thoughts. We can reframe negative thoughts by choosing to think differently. Like I said, the example about her stepping on my foot. If I can choose to either to think that it was malicious, or I can choose to think, okay, that may have been a mistake. And that's going to determine how I act. So there are many different ways and many different techniques that you can use to not only challenge negative thoughts, but also challenge anxious thoughts. And so I am blessed to be here to share with you guys. I pray that everyone has gotten something. Listen, if you need resources, you can always go to psychologytoday.com. You can type in your zip code, and it would immediately give you a plethora of clinicians that are in your area that will be glad to service you. But shop around. Shop around. You don't just go to any doctor. You call people and say, you ever heard of such and such? And you go and you read about them. And that's what you need to do for therapists. And if you have questions, you need to ask. And you have a right to have, most therapists give a free initial consultation. During that initial consultation is a great time for you to decide, I don't know if me and her gonna jive real well, or yes, I think she and I will have a good chemistry. Those are the kind of things you need to do when you're talking about going into therapy, and ask questions. I had one young lady, she had a list of questions, and it tickled me so bad, but I was not offended by it. You know why? Because she's concerned about her mental health. She's vested into her mental health, and she needed to know she had a clinician that was as well. So please, if you are depressed, please seek counseling. If you are on this call and you are having any type of suicidal ideation, self-harm ideation, please get on the phone and call the suicide hotline. You can Google that number. I should have popped it up on the screen. I'm going to try to have these numbers up there if I'm asked to come back and do another one. And that way we'll have those resources for everyone when they get ready to unplug if they need them.
I had 2 more questions to drop in.
Okay.
I guess everybody's opening up.
Okay.
This one says, what do you do when your family member is dealing with depression and refuses to accept the help being given, and it's weighing heavy on you and your mindset?
One of the things about being mentally strong and having good mental health is learning how to disengage from things you can no longer influence. If you've done everything you can, just stand, okay? You're gonna have to pray for them, and there's nothing you can do. You have to disengage from things that you can no longer influence.
Right. And then the last one, I have a teen that's admitted to being depressed. The teen has completely shut down and stays in their room. What can I do to help?
One of the most wonderful resources for teens in the Shreveport area is Volunteers of America. They have outpatient programs. They have programs inside of the schools. You need to call Volunteers of America, and you need to let them know that you are looking for a counselor for your kid. Listen, it is important when these teenagers are telling you all that they are feeling depressed, you gotta listen. Because can I give you this little nugget? This younger generation has been desensitized to death. And it's not anything that is really real to them. They play so many video games. They live in such a virtual world where death is not even a real concept to them. They don't understand how permanent that is. They don't understand that you don't apply a permanent solution to a temporary problem.
Right.
And so they don't fear death. They're not afraid to die. They almost see dying as their place of peace. So that's why it's important when you have a teenager that is saying they are depressed, you have got to immediately move on that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Can I say, Miss Princetta, can I say something? Miss Brown, you touched on that because that was one of the questions. Because with the Miss America, the young lady that just killed herself, and nobody knew she was going depression. I mean, how do we what signs can we look for? Because I know you gave us some, but everybody said they didn't see any signs.
And sometimes you won't. Sometimes you won't see any signs. Some people will mask it because of the what? Stigma. Here she is, this beautiful girl who's supposed to have everything going on. How can I go before people and say I'm suffering? Because people are looking at me and they think that I'm perfect. That's her thought process.
That's right.
So some people actually suffer in silence and they hide it. But some other signs and symptoms that people may be depressed of: low mood, a change of habits, change of sleeping habits, people that become socially withdrawn, or they begin to isolate themselves from other people. People that talk about death, when they start speaking language that sounds hopeless, that sounds helpless, when they start having feelings of worthlessness, when they begin to lose interest in things that they once enjoyed. All of these are signs and symptoms of depression. Eating habits change. There's so many different signs and symptoms of depression. And then there are people that mask it and you never get an opportunity to even see those signs and symptoms. That's why we've got to open this thing up. We've got to break down this stigma, and we've got to let people know that it's okay to say something if you're suffering. And if you see something, you say something.
Right. Mrs. Brown, thank you so much. You have been extraordinarily helpful. I can tell that you are absolutely passionate about what you do. It's not just your profession or something you've been trying to do, but you really have a heart for people to be okay. And that's good to know. We will be doing these virtual forums every third Monday in the month. If there are topics that you would like discussed, you can submit those. I would assume to Sister Rhodes Mahoney or some kind of way at the church. I don't know who you would submit it to, but you can submit topics that you want discussed, and then we can relay those topics to whoever the invited professional is, and we can that'll be the discussion from time to time. So if nothing else, Sister Rhodes Mahoney, you have anything else or any way you can tell us how we can submit the topics?
Yes, ma'am. They can submit it. If tonight they want to submit it on Facebook, YouTube, they can put it in the chat. They can send it to me. They can call the church office and leave the message with the secretary, and then they'll convey the message to us. Because what we're going to do is we're trying to get us a calendar so we can know what topics we're going to discuss every month, and we can put it out there so everyone will know. We will certainly have Miss Kenyatta Brown back. You know, she has volunteered that she would do it each month, and Sister Miss Ramona Jones will be coming back also. And we'll just have different councils we'll try to invite to come in so that we can have an array of people talking with us. Miss Jones, Ramona Jones, she does council teams. So she just couldn't be here tonight, but she is the team counselor.
Okay. All right. Well, if nothing else, our time has absolutely been well spent. Thank all of you who shared tonight. We invite you to come back next third Monday. I know we'll be putting it out there with the exact date and time again, and by then we'll probably have whatever topic we're going to discuss. And so we're going to, I don't think the pastor was ever able to get on. Okay, so we'll just close out with the word of prayer, and hope you all have a good and safe and peaceful night. Let us pray. God, we thank you, we bless you, we honor you, oh God, that you want us to be at peace in our minds, in our hearts, in our spirits. We thank you so much for Mrs. Brown, for all that she has shared with us tonight, for her passion and for her heart for people. I pray your blessings on everyone who has tuned in, who is listening. I pray for their peace and their comfort, oh God, and that if they are in need, that you would give them the courage to seek the help that they need. We bless your name. We give you praise and glory, and we pray it all in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
Good night,
Amen.
Thank
everybody.
you. Good night.
Amen. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.